I'm not the MC today. Thank goodness. You don't have to put up with me all day. But we have with us in attendance Mr. Ryan McMahon coming to us and sharing his gift of Yapaha, our MC here today to talk about and share and introduce our speakers. Uh, I respect him very much for the work he's done with his podcast and delivering an Indigenous method through comedy, through activism, and all these great things, and getting the word out to our nation here in Canada and in the United States and globally. And he's done that and recognized globally around the world, and really honored here that he's agreed to come and share this MC gig today with all of you. So with that, I'd like to introduce Ryan McMahon. Let's give him a big round of applause.
Hi, good morning, everybody. The latecomers, just make your way to your chairs quietly and give us 20 push-ups. We'll all watch. Can we get the lights brought up, please? It is an honor to be here. My name is Ryan McMahon. I'm based out of Treaty 1 territory in Winnipeg, Manitoba. I'm originally from Couchiching First Nation, which is in northwestern Ontario. I'm Anishinaabe and Métis. And when Chris told me about this conference, I immediately said that I wanted to support it because it's something that I've been thinking about a long time. We all watch on YouTube, it comes across the Facebook once in a while, these things called TED Talks. And they're inspiring, and there's a lot of really great motivation and messaging behind all of these TED Talks. And certainly you can learn a lot about the world and weird facts about science and all the rest. But Chris said, Ryan, what I really want to do is do something called Red Talks, where we can have our people have the microphone and present their ideas. And it's a beautiful day to be able to do that. And what better cause, what better effort than Indigenous education? A few years ago, that beautiful brown man, that friend of mine, Mr. Wab Canoe, you guys know him, right? He's not here, so you can keep your clothes on, but a few people looked at the back. Where is he? Where? He was on that CBC series, Eighth Fire, and one of the memorable T-shirt moments of this series was when he said education was the new buffalo. And there's a lot of debate on what that might mean and what the new buffalo might actually be. But it's a great idea that education is our sustenance. Education is the thing that will bring us forward, take care of us, will bring us to health and bring our communities back to life once again. And I do agree with that sentiment. But we have to be careful about how we define education and what we define as success. Because I think there's a real danger that sometimes we measure our young people against those that have come before them or those that walk beside them or in some cases in front of them. Indigenous success is a really diverse topic and a diverse conversation. I do a lot of youth leadership and empowerment work, both in colleges, universities, high schools, grade schools. I was asked to go to a fly-in community in Lac La Croix First Nation. It's a remote community about 150 kilometers west of Thunder Bay, Ontario. And I was asked to deliver a theater workshop. I have a degree in theater, and I love doing theater. It's like a life skills program on steroids is what I call it. And we were doing the introductory stuff and kind of getting the youth to get to know me a little bit. And I sat there, and usually my opening spiel with young people is, get out on the land, no matter where you're from, get out on the land, listen to the elders, go cut some wood, get off the Facebook. Some of you are on Facebook right now. Put it away. I can see you're in a dark theater. That light is just lighting up your big nose there. Get the phones away. But my opening spiel is always kind of the same thing, where I tell them, everything that we need is out on the land. That includes our language, our songs, our teachings. And I'm talking like that to these young people. And this group of about 20 young people are looking at me like I had just farted, They're confused. They're staring at me. Nobody's laughing. Nobody's smiling. And I had to call a timeout. I had to say to the guy that brought me there, I said, let's do the snack and then we'll get into some exercises and whatnot. And I went and I asked the guy, I said, what's going on? These kids hate me. What this has never happened before. What's happening? And he said, Ryan, I got to tell you that all of these kids were out on their trap line this morning. That all of these kids speak their language. Anishinaabemowin is their first language. That they already live off the land, that this is the way they live. So you're preaching to the choir, they already understand all this. And it was a really humbling moment, because here I was, somebody that is trying to relearn my language, somebody that is making an extra effort all the time to bring my family out to the land and to reconnect with what that might mean as an Anishinaabe person. It was a humbling moment to know that as an educator, that I was brought there to teach them something that, in fact, in that moment, I was being taught by those young people. And when we define success, it might be that you have a PhD. It might be that you speak your language. But that word success is certainly relative. And where we come from in our communities, we have to measure it differently all the time. And I encourage everybody to think about that today as we listen to our speakers, to think about how you define success. Educators, guidance counselors, band counselors that look after the education portfolio, whoever you are, and for whatever reason you came here, I encourage you to think about that, because there's a lot of different types of success. And our young people learn in many, many different ways. Our young people go out and do things that will absolutely blow our minds, things that we've never thought of yet. And it's going to be exciting as we talk about these things today. And we have an incredible lineup of speakers for you. Are you guys excited for this? By a round of applause, let me know. Yes, absolutely. So I want to do a couple of quick housekeeping notes. The speakers have traveled a long ways to be here. We just ask that everybody have their phones on vibrate if possible. You don't have to turn them off, but if you just have them to vibrate so there's no ringing phones during the speeches. Some of our speakers are nervous, and it'll interrupt their flow if we have phones going off. So if we could do that, that would be great. If you're on Facebook or Twitter, I was kidding. You don't have to not be on it. It would be great if you told everybody that you were here. Help us out through social media and spread the word about this. I understand that there is a vision behind this, and we're going to see many, many more years of this type of conference happening. So the more people that know about this, the better. So we do encourage tweeting and Facebooking. Just no Facebook pokes during the speakers. That's offside. And finally, we just want to acknowledge those that worked so hard to bring us here. We'd like to say thank you to the conference committee, Chris Scribe, Yvette Arcand, Irene Oakes, Rita LaPlante, Andrea Michelle, Alyssa Weeb, and Brenda Mergel. Could you please give a round of applause to your coordinating committee? So we are gathered here in Treaty 6 territory, opened up in a good way with our elders. And what we are going to do is we are going to explore Indigenous education over the next couple of days. We encourage everybody throughout the next 2 days to do a lot of networking as well. We're here to share best practices. We're here to share successes, but also failures. And we'll be exploring all of these things through these speeches today. Tomorrow there will be breakout sessions. If you haven't already done so, we encourage everybody to get their hands on the brochure. And there's also a pamphlet here with maps and information to the events following today. So please get your hands on these. These are important. You're going to want to pay attention to these throughout the next couple of days. And then finally, this evening, There is a gala event, starts at 5. The mixer is from 5 to 6, and the dinner begins at 6 this evening. Tickets still available, Chris? For those that haven't, if you'd like to bring friends or family out for this evening, you can talk to Chris about getting those tickets. We have a great lineup of entertainment for you this evening. I will be there doing some stand-up comedy. We have some cultural presenters as well. Going to be a really diverse evening of entertainment, so everybody come on out for that. And again, all of that information is going to be found in your materials. Good? Covered everything? All right, awesome. This morning, I finally found out why I was so dumb. I always wear glasses when they pray. It's just been bouncing off me for 37 long years. I listen so hard. I listen. I sit there, I listen. I close my eyes, I listen. I go home, I try to tell people what I learned, and sounds like I've been drinking for a week. Well, what was her name? I'm tired. So we invite everyone to take their glasses off and take in these wonderful speakers, because we have some of the most exciting, dynamic, and diverse people working in education today that have joined us. And this type of vision is the type of vision that we need more of in Indian country. Our first speaker comes to us from Treaty 6 territory. She works for the Sierra Club of Canada. She's a member of the Beaver Lake Cree Nation. She's a climate and energy campaigner for the Sierra Club of Canada and a fellow of the Indigenous Environmental Network. Crystal uses her formal education alongside her Indigenous ways of knowing and being to lead her in her work in protecting her homelands, her treaty territory, and her people's treaty rights. She's one of the most vibrant and dynamic young leaders that we have working on our side today. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Crystal Lameman.
Miasin, Geeksy Pio, Nia Crystal Lameman, Amisksagekan, Nehiao, Biagoskanos de Samau, or Yosiwin, Nugotosik. Good morning. I'm Crystal Lameman, Beaver Lake Cree Nation, Treaty Number 6. I stand here, first and foremost, not as anyone who claims to know anything, as a young person who was lucky to be brought up by her grandmother, and because of that, being brought up with old people. I'm merely a conduit. I'm also really lucky in that I have uncles that have done Indigenous rights work for many, many years. My uncle, Ron Lameman, had a hand in writing the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. My uncle Al Lameman was chief in our community for 35 years. And being raised by my grandmother, I was lucky enough to be brought up. Every day was common conversation talking about treaty rights, the rights of Indigenous peoples, are talking about our ways of knowing and being raised around our language. So I think I'm pretty lucky. And as a woman today, it's my responsibility to carry that forward for those who were not so lucky. When I looked at the title of this conference, it was this thought, this think Indigenous, just kept popping into mind. And I thought, how do I talk about thinking Indigenous? And the simple answer for me was, we don't have to look far. It's who we are. And through that thought, I was thinking about this Indian control of Indian education. And our responsibility as educators is to push. We have a real opportunity to change the trajectory of this system that is failing too many of our children. And I'm probably going to talk about some things that are going to make people really mad, maybe, really uncomfortable, maybe, and that's okay. So, as I was saying, I sat attempting to gather my thoughts in the best way that I could, and how I could approach what could be a sensitive subject, and trying to determine how I could best show the interconnectedness between Indigenous rights, rights of nature, and the education of our children. All I could think about was the statement, don't use those words. They don't understand. They don't understand because those that know fail to teach. We have fallen victim to a system defining what is teachable. As educators, we always hear that teachable moments. The really great thing about this tragedy is through the language and curricula around the education of our children has changed drastically. As we begin to assert our inherent right to self-determination, thus determining what the education of our children involves, and it is time that we begin having these conversations openly and honestly with our children. It is time that we make a commitment as educators to consolidating our efforts and push back on a system that is failing too many Nihio children. But what is the best practice in teaching our knowledge systems? The simple answer is there is no one best model. Only you, as an Indigenous person who identifies with a traditional territory and or community, the place you call home, only you know what your children need. It is, however, our responsibility as educators, in whatever capacity that may be, to begin using the language that asserts our inherent rights, our right to self-determination, self-determined and sustainable development, and the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and more specifically, our right to free, prior, and informed consent, regardless of whether or not this nation-state of Canada recognizes UNDRIP. We recognize it, and that's what matters. We must begin acknowledging the declarations that acknowledge our collective rights as Indigenous people. We no longer have the luxury of choosing willful ignorance in the over-industrialization of our traditional territories and its connection to education and its impacts on our collective rights, human rights, and the rights of nature. These conversations that we are having are not about the economy versus the environment versus the rights of Indigenous people. It is about a time where we begin having these conversations around the collective control of our natural resources based on the principles of people's participation, gender equality, environmental and social justice, self-reliant and sustainable management systems while maintaining natural law and the assertion of our sovereignty over our lands and resources. The shift to the focus on development rooted in our systems of natural law and not on the capitalist development, respecting Mother Earth, and that includes viable solutions as opposed to false solutions to climate change. Because if we do not acknowledge this, we will not have a world to teach our children in. We don't get to pretend anymore that air quality, water quality, and climate issues are not real. I understand that this type of language is uncomfortable for some. But if it makes you uncomfortable, then there's something terribly wrong. I get it. The classic pitting us against them. You know, I travel a lot in the work that I do, and I get called an activist, an environmental activist, a terrorist even. And I'm not an activist. I'm a protector. I'm a mother who's chosen to take the rights of Indigenous peoples and the rights of Mother Nature and push those issues forward. When did it become okay that our people had to choose their ways of knowing and being over feeding their families? When did it become okay that industry was welcome in our classrooms, assisting in the design of curriculum? Sit with that for a little while thinking about your roots. As someone who was raised by Nukum, my grandmother, like I said earlier, lucky enough to be raised around elders, to hear the stories, to be on the land. And I didn't wear glasses, so it must have went somewhere in there. You know, when I think about that, you know, the stories of the land, being out there, you know, that time when, you know, in early July, when the berries would come out and the trees would be heavy, just black, heavy with berries. You know, the ground would be blue. And we would go out, you know, and I was always following the old ladies. And we would sit there, you know, we'd go out into the bush with our little grub box, and we'd just sit and pick berries all day. And I would sit quietly, not putting the berries in the pail, but eating them, but listening at the same time, listening to those old ladies talk. And I think about it now, you know, where we're in a rush to pick berries before they go dry. You know, and that reminds me of the beauty of our land and our culture, our relationship with our one true mother. Yet here we are, drinking bottled water. Babies are being airlifted to the university hospitals for drinking contaminated water. Cancer rates and respiratory illnesses are on the rise. Boil water advisories common. Nations where they're having to time their showers and babies are being bathed in bottled water. Moose with pus bubbles under the skin, deer with green meat, fish with tumors and cancers hanging off of them. And then I think about those stories, you know, of our old people skimming the top of the water, taking their dipper from their backpack and drinking that water. I'm fearful that it's going to become just that, stories. Stories that we share in the classroom, stories that my children and our future generations can only hear of and never experience. And through the experiences that I have had in the work that I do, bearing witness to toxic air, I went up to Fort McMurray the past 3 years, but specifically 3 years ago, went up for the healing walk. And it was my son's birthday. And I thought I was doing something good, taking him up there so that they could see, they could go. I could take the classroom out onto the land, teach them that way. And to this day, I still have guilt in taking my son out there for his birthday, thinking I was teaching him something. Because no sooner did we start that walk in that toxic wasteland, praying, putting tobacco down, he got a bleeding nose. And then my niece had an asthma attack. And then I made that connection to the fact that just up the road from there, that's where those people are that are timing their showers and their babies are being bathed in bottled water. The Sahara Desert, in what was once pristine boreal forest, now a toxic wasteland, with a government yelling in the background that they are working on giving it all back. Giving what back? What was never theirs in the first place to take? Or what they like to call reclamation, where current models of reclamation are not adequate and are not proven to put the land back to the way that it was. And regardless of advancements in reclamation practices, reclamation cannot and does not mitigate impacts to our treaty rights. And it will take generations before the lands will even be remotely close to the way that it was. And in these generations, our ways of knowing and being will be lost. And it's so very important that we begin making these connections to extreme resource extraction, basic human rights, and what we're teaching our children. How are we to teach Indigenous knowledge systems if we get to a place where we cannot go to the wetlands, which is that fancy word for muskeg? Let's be real about that. If we cannot go there to teach our children cross-curricular teachings in science, social studies, language arts, art even, medicinal use of the plants that come from the muskeg. This is one minuscule example of what we are losing every single day. Our children should understand what it means when we talk about demanding and asserting green economies defined by us that put a stop to the capitalism of Mother Nature, thus pushing systems that reject the current system and recognizes our traditional economies and governance. Our children should understand what that means and what it means when we say we are moving towards asserting our inherent rights as economic rights. Because at this point, if our children do not understand this system and do not understand the Indigenous rights platform and the critical role it plays in our future, then where do we go from here? This current system is not working. And I'm not here to undermine the provincial system, but it is to say that we have sat quiet long enough, listening. And it is now time for us to get up, stand up, and utilize our ways of knowing and being to build a better pathway for our future generations. And as educators, do our very best to instill those very teachings into the non-Indigenous educators. Because knowing the periodic table, but not understanding self-determination, is why we are now having to play host to amazing conferences like this that assert Indigenous knowledge systems. So in your communities, or wherever it is that you are, demand systems that are founded on our right to self-determination and our permanent sovereignty over our traditional lands, territories, and resources, forests, water, and everything that sustains life for the future generations. And at one time, kind of speaking almost in the same type of setting, I wasn't sure how to relay this message to people that were not necessarily doing the activist work. As you can tell, I hate that word. So I went to my mentor Winona LeDuc, who lives down there in the White Earth Reserve in Minnesota. And I asked her, what can I share? What can I say? You know, when I was reading some of her stuff. And she said, stop doing stupid stuff. Do the right thing. And finally, grow traditional foods and grow smart. Yes, it's that easy. What those words remind me of is school gardens, good food boxes for our children, food security, and most importantly, the many, many, many Nihio teachings and the reclamation of our knowledge systems that will come from that. And like I said earlier, I'm not here to convince you or to ask you to agree with me. But I always say that, you know, in moments like yesterday where my children said, "No, Mama, you have to wait for us to get home from school before you leave." And so I waited until 4 o'clock. And my dad kept saying, you should go, it's a 5.5-hour drive. But I promised them that I would wait. So I waited for them. And I got here very late last night. And as soon as I leave from here, I'm driving right back home to be there for them when they get home from school. And then send them with their dad. And then I fly to London, England, for a week. And I'm very tired. But I always say that if I can influence just one person, then it was worth it. Be the change because you are the change. And so I'm going to leave you with this, and it comes from the Lakota people. Honor those who came before us, meeting the needs of the present generations, not compromising the future so that the coming generations are able to meet their own needs and guide our vision and renew each cycle of life. Nagsumaga. Ai.
One more round of applause for Crystal Lameman, everybody.